I bought a Miata. So this is my new 2002 LS Miata with a 6-speed manual and a limited slip differential and the hardtop. But wait, why did I buy a second car? Well, it's because I've got really into cars in the past couple of years, but I don't really have an engaging manual analog car that I can truly enjoy driving with, but also learned how to tinker on cars with. And so I got this. For $6,000, I got a lightweight rear-wheel drive sports car that's analog, stick shift, which I've never had, that I can learn to tinker on, and that's cheap. So I got myself a Miata. Okay, so I bought the car. What am I making this video for? Well, this car is almost 22 years old, and I really want to get the most I can out of it. And at the same time, I also want to learn to work on cars. I've never worked on cars. I don't really know much about how they work. And everyone seems to recommend the Miata because it's cheap, a lot were produced, which means there's a lot of parts, it's reliable, and parts are usually pretty cheap. So I'm making this series to document my adventure learning about cars and how to work on them as I go through a list of a lot of maintenance that I want to do in this car. Mainly fluid changes so that I can keep the car running as long as possible. At the same time, I'm probably going to make a few small upgrades along the way, like some better lighting, doing some detailing, and maybe potentially even something like an upgraded exhaust. But I've already kind of lied to you a bit. I already got started on my adventure about a week or two before I actually bought the car. See, the previous owner was in the middle of replacing the brakes when I'd posted about my search for an NB Miata. So he and I ended up actually working on the brakes together. We replaced the brake pads, brake calipers, upgraded the brake lines to stainless steel braided lines, and did a whole brake flush to get all the air out and also get out all the old fluid, which was pretty nasty when it came out. So with that, I guess let's get started with episode 1. And yes, I know, I said that I wanted a car that I could tinker on, just tinker on. But I ended up having to do so much more than just tinker on this car. So to get started, the first thing that I really wanted to address was the shifter. The shifter had this horrible slop to it when it moved that it shouldn't have had. It didn't feel rigid. And the internet told me that it's probably because the bushing is worn out. So I bought a shifter rebuild kit from 5X Racing with the bronze bushing, and I got started taking apart the whole center console to replace that, basically just following a couple of YouTube tutorials that I found. So while I had the center console out, I replaced the shift boot since the old one was torn. I bought a used one off of eBay for like 20 bucks, and then I popped it right in, pretty easy with just a few screws. Next, I unbolted the lower shift boot, and I'm so glad that I've taken this out because it was completely ripped up, and I'm going to be replacing with the new one that came with the rebuild kit. And then finally the shifter itself. And I didn't get good footage of it, but the bushing that's supposed to exist at the bottom of the cup was completely disintegrated and gone, which would explain why it was so sloppy. And now that I have the shifter out, I cut off all the old broken and torn up rubber and plastics, since the rebuild kit comes with brand new parts to replace all of it. And finally I cleaned out all the old gunk, grease, and possibly parts of the old bushing that had disintegrated from the shifter. So as part of the shifter assembly, there's these two pins that hold in a couple of pieces underneath them, which I'll show later on, and those were not budging at all. So I wish I had a better angle here, but I was basically taking a hammer to a screwdriver to kind of like push out those pins. So I had no luck with that at all. Like that was not coming out. So I eventually gave up on that. I really didn't have any luck getting the pins to budge at all, and after doing some research I found that it might be better off if I had a pair of vice grips, so I decided I'd come back to it later. In the meantime, I'd also planned to do the transmission fluid change while I already have the center console taken apart and the shifter turret open, since I have a 6-speed NB Miata in which the shifter turret opening is actually connected to the transmission itself. So I could theoretically just fill in the transmission fluid from the top of the shifter turret instead of having to open up that other bolt in the bottom of the transmission. So I started jacking up the car so I could get under there and start draining the transmission. So it's right about here when I realized I had a problem. The jacks I was using had a very deep V shape to the top to hold the car, but the pinch welds that hold the weight of the car were not actually that deep, and so the side of the jacks, the two tops of the V, were actually pressing into the body and holding the weight, which is not what it should be doing. I need the bottom of the pinch weld to make contact with the jack. So after adjusting it around a bunch, I realized these jacks will not work for the pinch welds. And this is after I'd already spent half an hour trying to get those pins out of the shifter, so I was really pooped. And finding out that I couldn't even do something simple like jack up the car was not fun. So I spent the next 30 minutes on Reddit looking for help and posting for help, and finally realized I just need to find different jacks that can better fit the pinch welds and support the weight of the car correctly. So in the meantime, I gave up on that and decided, hey, you know what, the shifter, that's at least a simpler thing to work on. Let me just finish that up, have my small win for the day, which turned out to not be the case. While I was at it, I also realized that I couldn't see any transmission fluid, so I thought, hey, maybe it's a little low on transmission fluid. Let me at least top it off while I'm here. I should have a little bit of extra fluid. So I started pouring the fluid in, and it gobbled it all up. I ended up pouring all 2 quarts that I had, which is supposed to be the capacity of the whole transmission, and it drank all of it. And that's when I really started to panic that maybe this car had been running without any transmission fluid. So I poured my transmission fluid that I have, and it took the whole quart. And from what I can understand online, the transmission takes 2 quarts of fluid. So I was like, okay, wow, that's half the fluid that I guess it's missing. But I still couldn't see the fluid, so I poured my second quart, which is at that point 100% of the fluid that I'm expecting to use. And all of that went in, and the fluid is still not topped off. So now it appears like the transmission never really even had fluid in it, which is not good at all for the life of the transmission, and probably means there's some damage that's already been done driving it. So I am quite concerned now why it could be at that point. My best guess is a leak. So I'm picking up 2 quarts. I'm picking up 2 quarts right now of the same fluid, and I'm gonna get back and check if there's any leaks. If not, I guess I'll just top it off and keep an eye on the level and keep an eye out for any leaks. So basically doing everything on my own for the first time is going splendidly. Yeah, it doesn't look like it, but I was in a full panic at this point. Alright, I think I solved the jack issue by getting new jacks. So I went down to O'Reilly's, found jacks that looked to be exactly what the previous owner had been using with his car, and sure enough, these fit so much better. You can actually see from even just this angle how much shallower that V is at the top that can actually hold the weight of the car on the pinch welds and not pressing up into the body instead. And ta-da! I finally got the front of the car jacked. After some panicking and driving around. And I felt pretty good at this point. And that's when I remembered that I hadn't even begun doing the transmission fluid change, which was the whole point of jacking it up. So with the car jacked up, I finally started trying to figure out where the transmission is, what it looks like, and it turns out the transmission is basically the biggest chunk of metal you see when you stick your head under the middle of the car. So after I learned what the transmission was, I tried understanding where the fill and drain plugs are, and the difficult part was I'd watched a video on a first-gen Miata, which is supposed to be quite similar, but that had a drain plug directly underneath the transmission, whereas mine did not. So after some research, I found that it's farther up on the side of it, which is a bit harder to reach. So then I spent the next hour or two trying to figure out how I can even begin to reach it, and also correctly identify it and make sure I'm looking at the correct side of the transmission. Keep in mind that I've never worked on a car before. I've never been underneath the car before, and here I am trying to do a transmission fluid change of my own. Alright, so after struggling for a long time, I realized I don't even have the right tool to open the drain plug. So I'm not sure if I might have overfilled it, so I'm not really going to drive it, but I think I'm just going to finish the shifter rebuild before it gets dark in an hour. But luck was definitely not on my side. As part of the shifter rebuild process, I have to fit this metal wave washer over the shifter, and that wouldn't fit on mine. Mine had a bigger lip than I saw in videos, and to make it even worse, it started drizzling. I have the shifter turret open, which is a direct hole to the transmission. I don't have a working soft top, and I don't have the ability to put on the hard top at the moment.
Oh no, it's starting to rain.
So I tried to clean everything up and got my roommate to help out, and it all worked out fine. After the drizzle subsided, I did a bit more research, and I found that for some models, the shifter has an extended lip, and the solution is basically just grind it down. So I spent a few hours trying to do that, gave up for a bit, emailed the company that I got this from for help, and waited until the next day. Okay, so yesterday sucked, and I did everything wrong, and I had all the wrong parts. I think I overfilled my transmission. I couldn't see the fluid level in the shift turret, so I poured in all the 2 quarts I had. And now I'm loading on the 6-speed. The fill line is below where all the shift mechanism is, so I probably just overfilled it. And draining the transmission while the car's on jacks is something I am not finding very comfortable. So I may just get someone else to do it. But in the meantime, last night I suffered trying to get the little tabbed wave washer. Where's my shifter? Last night I absolutely suffered trying to get this little metal wave washer that you can see here to actually fit over the lip. What I ended up having to do is file this down. You can actually see it's silver colored around here instead of the black because I filed it. I had to file that down and then hammer it over with like the back of my Leatherman tool, and then I used some WD-40 and squeezed this over last night. So I think the shifter's good to go. I think I'm just gonna reassemble the whole thing, clean it up, and then figure out if I just want to get someone else to do the transmission work. At this point I'm pooped. I'm failing to rebuild the shifter, do a transmission fluid change. It keeps raining. It wouldn't stop. So, oh, and then I forgot. I have been unable to get these pins out of here. I even went and I bought a vice grip to try and help me. But I've tried hammering, I've tried using the vice grip. So I'm gonna give it another shot. If I'm not able to make any progress, I'm just gonna leave the existing ring and wash underneath there because it's not working out and it's taking too much time. But yeah, this is what happens when you don't know what you're doing and you do everything for the first time all at once. So after hammering the pin out failed, I tried the other suggested method online, which is just to use a pair of vice grips and tighten it. Oh yeah, I also tried these vice grips last night really hard with no luck. That was fun. But it was just, the pins were not going to budge, no matter what I did. And I only found myself damaging the shifter turret and scratching it up. I'm going to leave it. This is a little too painful. I think I'm just going to leave it. Let's see. I have my shifter. Oh no, did I leave the bronze bushing inside? Aha! Bronze bushing. So, I dropped the new bronze bushing inside. Added just a drop of transmission fluid to help lube it up. And to line this up, there's a yellow dot that's kind of faded, but I understand that should go to the front. Whoa. Holy crap. It's already so much better. And that was my first time feeling the difference in the shifter. Gotta figure out where those line up. And I couldn't stop trying it out. I had barely put anything together already, and the shifter was already feeling so much better. Wow. I had a little bit of difficulty getting that lower shift boot to go on. So after watching a few videos, I followed their instructions and lubed it with WD-40, and that pretty much solved it. It went on much easier after that. I got the center console with the new shift boot on and put it back together. It felt nice to have everything back together after seeing it apart for a whole day or two. But this would not be the last time I have to take it apart. No, I forgot the foam. I'd forgotten to install the insulating foam around the shifter before I put everything back together. So I was like, hey, I'd barely put anything back together, that's fine. But I'm good now, but no, I was so wrong. At this point I was feeling especially good. After all the hurdles with the transmission and the shifter and the jacks, I finally was about to have my first win. Until this moment right here. What the? No! This metal ring's in the way. That shift knob wouldn't fit with the new shift boot, I think. This never ends. So there's a metal ring here that the old one didn't have that this one does have. And I thought, okay, it looked cool too, so I didn't really care. But it turns out that's hitting the top of the shifter and not letting this whole shift boot go lower where it's supposed to sit. So this shift knob, the stock shift knob, so the threads here don't even reach the threads of the shift knob, so the shift knob can't screw in because it's you can hear the metal kind of hitting it. So I might need to put the old one back on, figure out what to do after that. But on the bright side, it shifts beautifully if I just hold the knob in place and give it a whirl. I mean, this is amazing. It's nothing like what it was before, probably because there was no bushing left earlier. At this point I really thought I was about to have my win, but no, I had to take the center console apart again. Yep, the stitching is different. This doesn't have the metal bit, so I'll figure out what to do with that. Gave it a bit of a clean, put the old shift boot back in, and then hopefully for the last time, I put the center console back together. And guess what? The shift boot was the problem. So with the old one on, it went back on, everything went back together as it was before. And wow, did that shifter feel so much better. So the shifter's back together, and I think I'm starting to get an idea of what I've got myself into by buying this old car. Also, the main first lesson I've now learned about cars: don't assume that any of the parts that you've bought work or fit. Always assume that they won't work in some way, and if possible, triple check that before you use it. Or for example, do a test fit before you put it on. For example, like the shift boot. I never would have thought that would be an issue, but if I just tried it on without the whole center console set up, I would have seen that it wouldn't have fit, and I would have had to undo the entire center console before doing that. So I don't know if I can return it, but now I have an extra shift boot that doesn't fit my car. And to show you how much better this is, here's an after of what it's like. absolutely minimal wiggle, and oh man, is it smooth. Look at that. And now I can pretty clearly tell what gear I'm actually in. So 100% worth it. So after dealing with all the shifter fitment issues, trying to get the shifter assembly off, dealing with the shift boot, having problems with the jacks, having problems with it raining, and then starting to panic when I've overfilled the transmission, and that having difficulty even figuring out how to open the transmission on the bottom, I took the shifter as a win. So next episode, I'm really going to start doing the real maintenance on this car, learning how to change all my fluids, hopefully spark plugs. So yeah, join me for my journey as I discover that I have absolutely no clue what I'm doing with this car.